This is the third type of form we're going to talk about for an equation of a line. It's called point-slope form. This works best when you know the slope and you know one point on the line. We'll call that one point x1 and y1. So this is the formula that you'll see. Y minus y1 is equal to m times the quantity of x minus x1. So the first step you have to be able to do is write an equation. So when you're given the scenario, a line passing through point -3, 5 and has a slope of -3, 4, you have to know how to put it into the form. So we'll start with our form. Y minus y1 is equal to m times the quantity of x minus x1. So here we'll call the -3 an x1 and the 5 a y1, and then we know that this here is our slope of -3, 4. So now we'll put it into the form. Y minus 5 is equal to -3, 4 times the quantity of x minus, and because we have a -3, -3. Now, of course, we wouldn't leave it a negative and a negative. We would put it as a positive. So our final answer would be y minus 5 is equal to -3, 4 times x plus 3. The next example is a line passing through 2, 4 with a slope of 1/2. So again, we'll call this x1 and y1. Our slope here of a 1/2. So y minus, it's part of our formula, 4 is equal to 1/2 times the quantity x minus 2. This is a 3-star, so think carefully before you try this one. This is a horizontal line passing through the point -5, 2 with a slope of 0. So think about what a horizontal line looks like. A horizontal line, like the horizon, goes across here. If it has a slope of 0, then we know that it's actually crossing the y-axis. This is our y-axis. So we normally write these as y equals something. So we know it's a slope of 0. So in our case, 0x plus b. We wouldn't have a slope showing. So we got to find out where the intercept is. Well, if we look at our point that we have -5 and 2. So ask yourself, do you know what the y is? Somewhere on this line, it's going to have a point at -5, 2. -5 being at the x somewhere, and then up to 2. But it has 0 slope. So now we know that because we know the y, that this is y is equal to 2. The next thing you have to be able to do is state the slope and the point. Now remember what our formula looked like. So our formula is y minus y1 is equal to the slope and x minus x1. So if you look here and we see that this number -4, the negative is part of our formula right here. So then we know that our point for our y is actually a +4. So it's the opposite of what we see. We see a -4, so it's actually a +4. And then if we look at our x, the negative is part of our formula, and then we have a +3. Well, to get positive, we actually had to put a negative in there. A negative and a negative got us a positive. So we know that this is a -3. So our point for this line is a -3, 4, and the slope is clearly shown beside the parentheses. And so our slope is -2/3. Try this example and see if you can find the point and then a slope. Pause the video and then come back. Your slope here is a 1/2, and your point, if you want to look at the x first, we know that here is our x, 1, and negative is part of our problem, and we have a negative, so we actually put in a positive. So you think about what is opposite from what is there. So if it's a -7, we know we're looking for a +7 that we put in. Here we had a -10. Again, negative is part of our formula, so we think of the opposite, so this is a 10. So our point is 7/10 and our slope of 1/2 or a half. Pause again and see if you can do this one. All right, your slope is a 5, and your point, again, if we look at our x, we're going to do the opposite of what is here. So this is a -4 because it shows as a positive, knowing that a negative is part of our formula. And this, we're going to, again, do the opposite, so -2. Try to see if you can find this one. Did you get point 9, -3, and slope of -1/4? Good job. Your next level, you have to be able to graph it from this form. So to be able to graph it from this form, you've got to be able to find the point and to be able to spot a slope. So the first thing I'm going to do is think of what is the slope. Well, my slope is clearly stated here. So it's 2. And then just like you did on the previous unit, previous section, you had to find a point. So we look at our x, we're going to do the opposite of what's there. So we have a +4. And in our problem here, we have a +1. So we're going to do the opposite, and we have a -1. So now when we go to our graph, we know that we have a point on 4, 1. So we'll count over to 4, and then -1. And we'll put a spot right on our graph. Then we know we extend our slope 2, and it's positive. So we're doing 2 over 1. So up 2 and over 1. Up 2 over 1. Up 2 over 1. And if we need to extend the other way, it's down 2 and we go left 1. It still continues to be a positive. So down 2 and left 1. Down 2 and left 1. Then you have your line. The final type is mixed forms, and these get a little bit trickier. You have to pull in some prior knowledge that you already know. So in this particular one, we have to write an equation in SF, or standard form, of a line passing through 2, 8 with a slope of 1/4. So let's first remember what standard form is. That's the very formal form that we talk about. AX plus BY is equal to C. We do not want any fractions, or we do not want a -a in this form. So first thing we're going to have to start off with is using our point slope form. We know the slope and we know a point. So let's now start with y minus, and we look at our y1 that we have, 8 is equal to 1/4 times x minus the x1, which is in this case 2. So now that we have this here, we notice we have some fractions, and we know we're going to standard form and we don't want fractions. So one of the first things that I like to do is go ahead and clear that fraction. So I'm going to multiply the whole equation by the denominator that I see, which is a 4. It has to touch every piece except for what's in the bubble. Remember, it doesn't touch what's in the bubble because we'd be touching it twice. So 4 times y is 4y minus 32 is equal to, again, 1, and the bubble stays alone. Now we can distribute. So we have 4y minus 32 is equal to 1x minus 2. So now we want to get it into our form with the x and the y on the same side. So minus 1x minus 1x. We know that our 32 needs to go over away. That's part of our c. So plus 32 plus 32. So we're left with negative 1x plus 4y is equal to 30, and we can't have a -a value, so I'm going to multiply the whole equation by -1, and then that changes all my signs, so I end up with x minus 4y is equal to a -30. The final type we're going to talk about is writing an equation in standard form, but this time you're given 2 points of a line. So you're not given slope, but you are given 2 different points. So there's a couple different things that you can do with this one. The first thing, to be able to find the slope, you have to use the change of y's over the change in x's. So first you need to find a slope, and then you can use a point. So in this case, we'll call this x1 and y1, and x2 and y2, and we're going to now find our slope. So negative 3 minus 5 over 12 minus 6. You can cha-ching here. We would have a negative 8 over 6, and you end up with a negative, simplify this down, 4/3. Doesn't matter if the negative is up with the 4 or down with the 3 or right in front, this is what our slope is. So our slope is now a negative 4/3. So now we can use our point slope formula. We have a slope and we have 2 points that we can choose from. So we can decide which one we're going to use. Since we already have this one labeled x1 and y1, we'll go ahead and use this one. So this is y minus 5 is equal to the slope, which is negative 4/3, times x minus our x1, which is 6. Now, we see a fraction, so we're going to clear that fraction. So we end up with 3y minus 15 is equal to, in this case, a negative 4, and don't touch the bubble. Now, once we've cleared the fraction, we'll then distribute 3y minus 15 is equal to negative 4x, and then a negative and negative is a positive 24. Now you want to move the constant numbers over to where the c side is, because remember we're doing standard form ax plus by is equal to c, and we're going to move the x over to the side with the y. So plus 4x moves it over, and we'll go ahead and plus 15 and move this one over. So we end up with 4x plus 3y is equal to 39. And we have no fractions, and the a is non-negative, so that is our final answer. And this is an equation of a line that has 2 points that we were given. Now, from here, we could change it into slope-intercept, y equals form as well. We know how to get y by itself. So we have lots of different options with the 3 forms you've learned: slope-intercept form, standard form, and now point-slope form. All right. Good luck.